In trading, knowledge is power, and lack of knowledge in what you're doing can be costly, very costly. So you need a solid foundation of quality market education. Whether you're new to trading or a seasoned veteran looking to add advanced strategies to your arsenal, there's always something to learn and something to improve on. And now you can access the same knowledge that professional traders receive with Market Rebellion's Trading Education. I'm Bill Johnson, Head of Options Education here at Market Rebellion, and we've assembled a comprehensive curriculum based on decades of real trading experience, covering everything you need to know about trading options from beginner to advanced. We go way beyond the nuts and bolts of options theory to teach you how to apply specific trading strategies and the techniques needed to adapt your trades when markets shift. Regardless of your goals, you'll gain access to the education you need with easy-to-consume lessons so you can learn to trade with confidence, enhance your knowledge, and master the practical skills required for market success. So please join us for in-depth trading education only from Market Rebellion. Hey, welcome back to all of our Market Rebels. And I don't really have any words for today, guys, other than what a rally.
Wow. How about wow? Does that work? Wow.
Wow is a good starter. I didn't see the close. I know it was somewhere around 2%. Where did we finish on SPY and Q?
Yeah, the SPY was up 2%. The Qs were up a whopping, ready? Everybody sitting down? 3%, just shy of 3%.
For an index. Unbelievable.
12.
And what was NVIDIA? Where did NVIDIA close? That was the big shock.
NVIDIA was up the last time.
The last time.
$110, 16.4%.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, some stocks will do that in 2 years or 3 years. They did it in a day. Crazy.
Well, in all fairness, a couple of days ago, it did close at 723.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, it did. And then it sold off.
Couple of days prior to that, right before the earnings. But it was trading 740, 730, and we are at 780. So yeah,
good. So that's kind of what prompted the idea for today's presentation. So this isn't as focused as a lot of other presentations are on a very specific topic, but I have found, and I know both of you hear this a lot from traders and coaching, it's really a topic that everybody asks about. It's just a very broad topic of risk. And we find that so many people just have complete misperceptions about risk and how to even define it. So good conversation.
It's kind of the problem, and that's the problem in and of itself. I often say if you ask 10 different people how to define risk, you're going to get 10 different answers.
Yeah, or 12.
And each answer and each person is going to think that the other person is wrong when in reality, they all can make an argument that's sort of a sound argument.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to see that that's especially true for the options. Not so true for the stocks, but especially true for the options. And that's why we find so many people make bad decisions.
And you know what the problem is? The problem is that the other 9 people never considered the other guy's definition of the risk.
Right.
Because they all live in their own little bubble and think, well, this is what it is. And they never really thought about things outside of their bubble that, hey, maybe there's another way to do this.
Yep. So let's go have a look. It's going to be a fun conversation. Again, definitely a little more open-ended. But let's start off with Chalk Talk, which remember is our little brain teaser question, something to think about, and then we'll come back and revisit it at the end of the presentation, show you the answer. Now, this also ties into what we talked about last week with the entire risk-reward connection. But let's say that somebody offers you 2 different bets. One, you can bet $1 to make 3, and another, you can bet 3 to make 1, assuming they're priced at fair value, all else being equal. The question is, which is riskier?
Yeah. Now read the question, everyone. Which is riskier? Right? That's the question.
And we're going to find out a lot of people will define that differently. But the thing that most people look at is the price. And we talked about that last week. That's one thing you want to avoid, is to say that the price defines the risk. So that's really our topic here. And that is, how are you, the trader, defining risk? And we're going to find out there's a lot of holes where people either misinterpret it or just overlook it. Okay, so with that little introduction, remember, little recap from last week. Price is not risk. If there's nothing else you get from today's presentation, this is it. You cannot look at something and say, well, I only paid 30 cents for this option, so therefore it's low risk, because I only had a small amount of money into it and therefore could only lose a small amount. And as we found out last week, the reason for that relationship is exactly the risk-reward relationship. That's why when things are cheap, it's because they're high risk. So as a quick summary, now we saw this is last week. So for anybody who's new, who didn't see last week's Coach's Corner, you can go and look that up on YouTube as well. But very quickly, we looked at 3 hypothetical games where you could bid for a $100 bill. One was guaranteed, one you had to flip a coin, and one you had to draw the ace of spades from a well-shuffled deck of cards. So in the first one, we assumed that we got a very high price. Let's say $99 was the highest bid that we got for somebody to get $100 guaranteed, which makes sense. There's no risk in it at all, so they're going to bid it very close to that value. Now, if they had to get for the same $100, they had to flip a coin. Theoretically, it's worth 50. We might get somewhere less than that, let's say 45. So now we can say this is an opportunity to pay 45 to make 55. And then finally, if they do the card game for the same $100, we might find that somebody's only willing to bid $1. And so now we can restate this as an opportunity to pay $1, something very low, to make potentially a lot. And the thing that we showed last week is that this connection is that as we go from the guaranteed game to something that has more risk or more uncertainty, how did the crowd react to the price? Pushed it down. Crowd says, I recognize all things being equal, I'd rather not have risk. But if you give it to me for a low enough price, I am willing to accept that risk. In other words, it's been priced in. And if we bid the price down, what happens to the reward? Reward goes up. It went up from $1 now to 55. If we increase the uncertainty some more, going from the coin game to the card game, the crowd reacts by bidding the price even lower, and then that pushes the reward even higher. All right, so this is the risk-reward relationship that we looked at in detail last week. And what we want to do now is to kind of continue on with this conversation saying, all right, that's the risk-reward relationship. As the risk goes up, the price comes down. But now we're going to find out there's a lot of different types of risks that you could respond to. It's not just about the probability of expiring worthless. There's different types, and that's, once you understand these, it will help you to make better decisions as options traders.
But let's start talking. Let's
Sure.
try and get everyone to start thinking about risk not in terms of dollars, but in terms of probabilities.
Absolutely.
Right? Probabilities. What's the probability that something's going to happen? When you buy a T-bill, what's the probability you're going to get paid off? You want to call
100%.
it 100%? I would probably call it 100%. Right?
Close enough.
That's what Bill's talking about. That's why the price is so high. What's the probability that your lottery ticket that you buy for $1 or $2 is going to pay off? Well, pretty close to zero, which is why it's $1.
Which is why it's priced at $1 and has
Right.
a huge potential reward.
If you had a higher probability, it wouldn't be $1 anymore. And you know, talking about now when you get into the options world, it's not just about is it stock going up or down. It's going to be there's other wheels, there's other cogs in the wheel here, and I think this is where you're going, Bill. Right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So very good perception there. So there are many types of options risks, and believe it or not, these are not all of them, but they're probably more than you've considered. I don't mean you guys, but I'm talking about our viewers out there. So I think most people know the basics: delta, gamma, theta, vega, and rho, right? So those are the ones that we definitely want to be aware of as traders. But there are even more than these. There's actually combinations of these. And so sometimes in the professional world, we call them the second tier or the second order Greeks.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that they're second derivatives, but that they are a kind of a subset of these.
Yeah,
and they usually go by the names of T delta, T gamma, V delta, V gamma, V theta.
Yeah.
The way that we read these, the first one is the variable in question, let's say time's effect on delta.
Right.
So
yeah,
as time goes by,
the way you put it was really good. It's a combination. Like, how does the advent of time change the delta? How does the advent of time? How does the advent of when you put the time with the gamma, what happens as time goes on to the gamma? And we have ways to measure that as well. Generally, like you said, we don't really think about it too much, but really, now that I think about it, we're really thinking about it all the time. As an option gets closer to expiration, what's going to happen to the gamma? I mean, that's
exactly what it is, right? We don't have to call it T delta or T gamma, but we understand that it's going to be changing. We understand why. And if this is a little confusing, some of the charts in just a moment will help to make this clear. But we've talked about this with usually called the Trumpification effect. For in the money, those deltas are going to be closer to 1. And for the out of the money, they're going to be closer to 0 as time passes. And so that would be a kind of an easy way to understand what T delta is. What is time's effect on delta?
And you can do the same thing with volatility. As you add or subtract volatility, how's that going to change the delta? This is all theory. This is all you being able to say, well, what's my position going to look like when fill in the blank?
Yep. So anyway, that's just kind of a quick survey of some. Again, these are not all of them. We could do all kinds of combinations.
Yeah.
But these are things that professional traders are very well aware of. We might even be trading T delta or T gamma, not just delta or just gamma. Or if we are just trading these, we are aware that these are other risks we have to account for.
Yeah, and if we're not right. Let me step in just for a second here. And look, everyone, don't get carried away. Oh my God, now I got to start researching V delta. What are these guys out of their mind? That's not the point here. The point is that there are things that you need to consider that you may probably are not considering. That's the point.
Yep. So just a little side note. Sometimes you'll hear these go by some very strange names. You'll hear things like charm and color. T gamma is sometimes called color. This is sometimes called vana. Come up with all these different names that are supposed to sound like Greek letters that are showing these second order. But most of the times I've seen them, I think this is an easier way to interpret because the name pretty much tells you what's being described. What is volatility's effect on delta? Once you understand T delta, it's going to be exactly the same. So anyway, that's just some of the idea. Now, again, if your head is spinning, good. That's what we want. We want to show you there's a lot of things and a lot of risks that you're not even considering.
Yeah, spin away. That's a good thing. Now you're thinking outside the box.
Now you're thinking outside the box. And if your trades are not coming out as expected, trust me, this is a big part of the reason.
And let me say that if your trades are not coming out as expected and you're not asking yourself why, then you should probably find something else to do.
Yep.
Right. You got to say why.
Yeah. Most people think, I didn't get the direction of the stock right. It's far more than delta, far more than that. So speaking of that, I've often said, and I know you guys use kind of the same analogies and things, but a lot of times we say that shares of stock, if you are a stock trader, that it's one-dimensional. And what that means is that if you are thinking about buying NVIDIA or Microsoft, there's really only one choice that you have to make. And that is it going up or down? All right, so here's a tough question for you. Stu, if I think that NVIDIA is going up, I want to be a stock trader, what's the trade?
Buy the stock.
There's nothing else to decide. Right? It's that, and that's what we're trying to show is it's just that simple. It's a one-dimensional thing because the whole story is up or down. Now, of course, we can refine it and say, how much are you willing to put into the trade? And we can maybe buy 10 shares or 1,000 shares, but the basic decision is up or down. However, and this is a big however, when we go into the options market, and by the way, there are no certificates. I did that just for to make the good visual. But when we go into the options market, traders think that it's still an up-down game. They think, oh, I get it. If I think the stock is going up, I buy the call. If I think it's going down, I buy the put.
Bill, I have a question for you.
Yep.
Did you hack my computer?
Why is that?
Because the certificate on the left looks like my Commodore computer certificate from 100 years ago.
I got that from either Shutterstock or one of the other things. I don't think it's a real. Is it a real cert? I don't know.
I don't know, man. I'm just kidding.
But anyway, when you're buying an option, it is more than just up or down. At a minimum, we also have fast or slow. Why? Because there's an expiration date. It's not just to say, I think the stock is going up, but it's up by what time? See, if I think a stock is going from 100 to 110, and I buy a 30-day option, and it only goes to 103 at that time, but then it goes to 110 after the 30 days, I was right. It did go up, and it did go up to 110, but it wasn't within the time frame that I thought. So that's why that can still end up being a loser.
Would that be the options fault, Bill?
No, it depends on who you ask. Right? It's either the market maker's fault or the options fault.
It's always the market maker's fault. And
it can always fall back to the market makers.
Yeah, those guys are scumbags. Look, the idea here is like I've said this before. You got to run your idea. You can't let an expiration date run your idea. If you have an option that you picked for some expiration date for some reason, whatever the reason was, and you still believe in the idea, but your expiration date is upon you, it becomes incumbent upon you to roll that out to buy some more time. Right? That's Absolutely. It. Right? It's not over because the expiration came. It's over because you decided it wanted to be over. You have to make that decision. It's not up to the option to make that decision for you. You have to be very proactive that way.
So if we have, let's say hypothetically, if we were looking for a fast, aggressive move, I might want positive gamma. I would probably be looking to buy an option. If I were looking for a slow move up, I would probably want negative gamma, positive theta. So I might take a short put instead of, they would both have positive deltas, right? So I'm still on the up axis here, but it's a question of how fast. And so that's where we have to start thinking about fast or slow. Now, again, there's a lot of different dimensions in here, but at a minimum, we have up, down, and fast, slow. And most traders completely miss that. So as an analogy, again, I know it can sound very confusing, but think of it like driving a car. We can get in our fancy little car here, and we could say that maybe a car is a one-dimensional asset, like shares of stock. But instead of up and down, it's forward and backwards. And a lot of people might say, yeah, I've been driving for 20 years, got a perfect driving record. Therefore, I should be able to jump into a helicopter. But what they're not thinking of is you've got lots of different degrees of motion. Just like a car, you can go forward and backwards. And just like with shares of stock in an option, you can go up or down. However, with the helicopter, what have we got here going on? We can also go up, down. We can kind of bank or tilt left or right. We can tilt front to back. We can spin. There's a lot of different degrees of motion in a helicopter that are not present in a car. And that's why you shouldn't just say, I've got a perfect driving record over here on the road that just goes forward. I can either go forward or backwards. And therefore, I should be able to just jump into a helicopter and make this thing work. And yet that's exactly the same logic that traders use when they come from the stock market to the options market. Why? Because I came from a world that's up, down. And so when I step into the options market, it's super easy. Buy a call if we think it's going up, buy a put if we think it's going down. And that's what gets people hurt. There are many different types of risks.
And you know what I just thought about? You were talking about V down at the second tier of Greeks.
Yeah.
It's not the helicopter going straight while it's kind of turned to the side a little bit.
Yeah.
Turned to the left.
Yes.
There you go, right?
You can't do that in a car.
No.
Right? You're or at least you can't bank. I mean, you could be going off on an arc, but you can't bank. You can't tilt
go up or down. Not yet.
Nope.
Anyway, not flying cars.
Getting close.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's kind of a good analogy of what we're talking about when we're talking about different types of risks or degrees of motion in an option that are not present in shares of stock. That is crucially important.
Yeah, all over the place, right? Because you can
All over.
adjust degrees of delta. You can
Oh,
adjust
sure.
degrees of gamma, of theta, of all this. You can do that, right?
Yep.
When you start asking yourself, "What am I comfortable with?" That kind of answers, well, which option should I go to?
Yeah. Should I go forward in a helicopter or forward and rising? Or should I go forward and rising quickly? That might be gamma. Or forward and rising slowly would be a very low but positive gamma. But see, you don't have those choices in a car. All
And
right,
the car is the stock here, right? You don't have the
that's
choice.
the stock is, but instead of left, right, the stock is up, down, and the option can be up, down, or at least part of your decision is. But then we've got all of these other factors that can really.
Car's either moving or it's not. That's it.
That's it. Yep. So, which is also why we can make from the stock staying still with an option when you can't do that from the stock. All right, so let's go find out how this comes into play. And as always, before we do, put in a quick little plug here for marketrebellion.com/get started. Lots of free stuff, articles, videos to help you really get some good information to help you get started on your options career. Ian, even if you are somewhat active in options trading, still maybe not have been doing it for that long, lots of great information that probably not going to see anywhere else. So hopefully,
it always helps to review, and you always find something new. I find
that's so true.
Always, go through the coursework again.
Second and third time, Pat. Yep, is where you really
pick something up that you didn't see before.
Yep. So let's take a look at some examples here. So here is scenario number one. You want to buy shares. Why? Because you think it's going up. So let's say that the stock is at 100 and you come up and say, well, as part of my risk management, I don't want to take losses below 80. Why? I don't know. That's just what this trader wanted. And just like with the options, you're free to make that choice, but that's going to help us structure the trade. It's also going to help us keep our perspective of which risks we are taking and what we should be willing to take.
Bill, do I have that option, no pun intended there, so to speak, if I buy the stock to not take losses below 80?
Good question. Not really, but what would most traders say? What do you think most traders?
They're going to say, "Oh, I got a stop order."
We think too much. Exactly.
Oh my God!
I knew somebody was going to be thinking that out there and say, "Well, sure, I can put a stop order." Well, stop orders are not guaranteed to prevent losses. They might, but they're not guaranteed, and therefore there's a very big difference.
How did that stop order? How did that short that you took in Nvidia because you thought the stock went down?
You shorted the stock and put a stop order $5 above, right?
Yeah, how did that work out? Not too good, right? When the stock opened, I think where did it open? 735 or something?
Yeah, something like
that, right? You got a market order, and you're in
or if it's a limit order, you're still holding it short.
Yeah, you're 40 points below the market. So what?
Right. You're either way. You did not guarantee to prevent a loss.
Yeah, but they're watching it, right? They're watching.
I love that. Watching it closely. Now, we've talked about this also in Q&A classes. There is another more detailed reason why this is an important detail. Stop orders are what are called a path-dependent tool. In other words, the degree to which they work or don't work depends on the path of the stock. So if it slowly trickles down, you've got a long stock position, you get triggered out, and then it continues to landslide. Hey, it worked as beautiful as you could ever expect. But if it just triggers you out, and then it goes on to a tear to the upside, well, now it didn't work out so well. But see, that's not true for the option. If you have a put option and the stock dips below that strike, it doesn't trigger you out. And if the stock rallies beyond that, it doesn't trigger you out. It's a block of time. So options are time-dependent tools. Stops are path-dependent tools. And that's another super important distinction. That's why we have to pay for the option and not for the stop orders. So let's take a look at a pricing model that says hypothetically a 90-day $80 call. So it's $20 in the money, trading for 21. All right, so Scotty, let's pull you in here. I know we talked about this a couple weeks ago. From a professional trader, I know the
OCC is going to define it differently. But how much would, from a professional trader's standpoint, how much would we say is the option?
Well, it's a risk premium of $1, so we would probably say $1.
We would say it's the premium over parity. Now, yes, the true textbook definition of the options premium is the total price is 21, and that's fine. But just understand that you need to see it from a different perspective. What you're paying for the right to walk away is $1. You are not paying $21. You're paying $20 of intrinsic because you're asking somebody to give you the right to pay $80 for a stock that's currently at $100. I mean, if they gave you that for $15, what a great deal. Buy it, exercise it, and just say thank you very much for the free money. It's got to trade for at least $20. All options. It doesn't matter if this has 1 day to expiration or 3 years.
$20 of intrinsic value.
Got to trade for the intrinsic value.
Still can change, but assuming that doesn't change. We're going
to talk about that. Exactly. That's a potential risk, but the option risk, not the delta risk, the option risk would be $1. So now another question for you. I'll throw it to Stu's direction here. So Scotty just identified that this is really a $1 option from a professional trading standpoint. What's the option going to be worth at expiration? Now, sometimes people say, well, we have no way of knowing. Not true. As a professional trader, what's that option going to be worth?
Well, I'm going to say like 999 times out of 1,000 is going to be 0. But yeah, the answer is 0, right? When time is over, there's no more. There's no
reason to be buying it.
You know, it's like the game is over. The Fat Lady song. I mean, that's it. It's over. So
it's done. Right. So the thing is that we know for a fact, the very moment we bought this option, that we paid a $1 insurance premium for the right to walk away. And we also know with 100% certainty that that dollar is going to be 0. It's just going to be intrinsic value. Hopefully we've got intrinsic value at expiration or 0.
Let me throw a question out to the people.
Sure.
And of course, I can't hear their answers, but just ask yourselves, when you buy an insurance policy, whether it be health insurance, car insurance, home insurance, whatever kind of insurance it is that you're buying, do you or do you not consider that insurance cost a sunk cost?
Sure.
It's gone, right? You're not like calling up the insurance company at the end of the year saying, hey, I didn't have an accident. Can I have my money back? It's gone. That's why you bought the insurance, to insure you against some catastrophic event.
Or to use the analogy that most people do, you didn't call after 3 months and say, well, I haven't gotten into a wreck yet, so I want to cancel my policy to get some cash back so it doesn't go to 0. That's the way that people trade the options.
Unless
you realize you're buying a block of time.
You're buying a block of time. Now, look, you know, in the insurance world, if you sold your house, you don't need insurance anymore. Well, that's one thing. And here, if you don't want to play the game anymore, then sell the option. Right? No, it's fine, man.
It's absolutely fine.
But that's on the assumption that your thesis about whatever it is that you bought it for, why the reasons why you bought it are no longer present. You have to come to that conclusion. That's your job, right? You have to come to that conclusion. You say, I'm done. This is why I want to be done. So you're done, right? Just give it back to the marketplace and get what you can for it.
Yep. So now let's keep this in mind. This is our setup. We've purchased this option. We know for a fact we're going to lose the dollar of extrinsic value. So the question that we have now is, well, what's the risk that we're taking? Now, most people say, oh, I'm taking high risk. It's a high option risk because it's $21 and I could have bought the out of the money for 30 cents. But is this a high option risk? Well, we just said it's only $1 out of $21. It's fairly low, less than 5%. But what you are exposed to is delta risk. So if you are using in the money options, or in this case, a deep in the money option, you are accepting delta risk. Remember, dollars are not risk. This is not you're not risking $21 because any intrinsic value is the same risk from buying the shares. We just saw we had $20 of intrinsic value on the $80 call. If you bought the stock for $100 and wanted to get out at $80, you're accepting $20 of risk, $20
that's
of
your
loss.
Choice, right? You can make that choice. Yeah, that's what.
So it would be completely unfair to say that now I've got more risk in the option. You've got $1 worth of risk in the option, not 21. So here's the risk graphs at expiration. The red line is our $80 call. There's our bend right there at 80. And if we are in the money at expiration, we're delta 1, right? Because we could, or somebody would exercise that call into shares. The black line is the shares of stock. Now notice that you can barely tell a difference between them. But why is the red line, it looks like it's sitting ever so slightly below the black line. Why is that? Looks like it's not quite as profitable as the black line.
Well, I think, didn't we already discuss this, right? You have a little insurance premium.
You've got an X, that red line is $1 below the black line. That's the insurance premium that you will never, ever get back. But can we at least say that reasonably speaking, they kind of behaved identically? Yeah, I think that's a reasonable assessment.
About the dollar's worth of sleep it bought me. Does that count for anything?
Right. So now let's say that, remember what the initial premise was, I'm willing to take a $20 hit, or I want to not have any losses below 80. All right, so there's 100, this dotted line. There's the $80 strike at our bend. That's a $20 hit. Now, here's where traders make their big misperceptions. They'll say, well, the stock fell to 80, it's down 20%. And my $80 call went from 21 to 0, and I'm down 100%. So therefore, I had far more risk in the option. And I'm never touching that risky.
This is where the market makers took all your money.
Market makers took all my money. I'm never touching those options again. If I'd held the stock, I would be down only 20%, blah, blah, blah. But let's look at it in terms of dollar loss. Percentages are not risk. The stock trader lost $20, you lost 21. That's exactly what we knew. Why is this now a big surprise? This is exactly what we just talked about, hypothetically, at the very moment that we just bought it. We are worse off by $1. So one thing in decision theory that we're always looking for when we're making decisions is to look at differences, not similarities. So Stu and Scotty, I know we've talked about this before, but I think it's a kind of a good analogy to show people why it's the differences that matter. So imagine that you're going to a car dealer. Car dealer says, hey, Scotty, this base model is $30,000, but the premium deluxe model is $35,000. How do you decide which one that you want? What's your question to the dealer?
I want to know what I'm getting for that extra $5,000. I want to know the difference between those two vehicles.
Very good. You want to know the difference. Why wouldn't you say, you know what do these have in common?
What do they have in common? Yeah.
And the dealer says, well, you know, this one has 4 tires and that one has 4 tires. This has a steering wheel, that has a steering wheel. And you go, oh, decision is now easily made because I know the similarities. You see how ridiculous it is? It's the differences. So now come back to our stock. What's the difference between the stock and the option?
Yeah, $1.
$1. It's a $1 option, and people don't see it. They say, oh gosh, this was a $21 option. It's super, super risky. Yeah. It's not. It's shares of stock with a $1 insurance policy attached.
And it doesn't even stop there. How about, 75? You don't have any control over where the stock price is going. How about 70? How about 65? How about a 50% haircut down to 50? I mean,
we've never seen that happen before in the markets, have we?
No, I've never seen that. See, that happens. That happens, right? You just picked 80 as your arbitrary number, but that may not be the market's idea of what your arbitrary number should be. And now that $1 insurance policy that you just bought, you might be able to cash that in for $6. Who knows?
Now, I've always talked about this as well. What if you wanted to exercise this call? With the stock at 80, you could exercise the call at 80. You paid 21. You've got a $101 cost basis.
Yeah.
And the stock's at 80, so you're down 21. And the stock, so I'm thinking, okay, well, you were just griping about how you lost 100%, but you would have only lost 20% had you bought the stock. Fine, exercise it. You're still down about 20%.
Yeah, it kind of looks the same to me.
Kind of looks the same. You can certainly feel free to exercise it. What if it goes to 70? You could exercise it at 80 and be basically in the same boat as the stock trader.
Wait a minute. Who's going to exercise an 80 call?
Exactly. See, now you're going to say it's it's worth it for me to pay 70.
Of course. And I was being facetious, everyone, right? You're not going to do that. You're just going to pay 70.
And you're going to say, my dollar option finally paid off.
Right. It just saved you $9.
Just saved you $9. So, but traders never see it that way. They go, oh my gosh, I lost 100% on the option. And now with the stock at 70, if I'd have bought that stock, I'd be down only 30%. Look how much further ahead I'd be. Wrong. You're ahead by having the option expire worthless.
Oh, here's another argument.
Because you chose delta risk.
Here's another argument. Yeah, but the stock has no expiration to it.
Fine. Exercise it into shares or continue to roll the options.
Right. Or yeah, just roll it out again. So what?
Roll it out again.
You saved yourself $10. Just roll it out again.
Right. You could buy another 90-day, this time an $80 call, or I'm sorry, maybe a $60 call or 50, something that's in the money for another $1 worth of extrinsic value. Now you've paid $2 worth of insurance policies, but you got to see where the stock ended up in 90 days. The stock trader didn't get that luxury.
Yeah, that's huge.
We got to wait and see if it made sense for us. So the point that I'm just trying to show here is that the policy, that extra dollar, was to block off this little red triangle. That's why we paid the dollar. It's a big benefit. I can exactly define my risk. I can make my strategies do exactly what I want them to do. And yet traders will do this and they'll say, oh, I would never buy the 80 call because it's so risky. I'll buy the stock. Well, this is stock plus a $1 insurance policy. Why is it stock? Because it's a very low risk, very low probability that option's going to go out of the money. That's why the market only charged you $1 for it. So it's basically stock. That's why we call it stock replacement. All right, so that's a really good example where people have gross misperceptions of the types of risks. Again, they'll say that this is far riskier than the stock because it's a $21 option, or I lost 100%. It's $1. That's it. And yet it's going to make you make bad decisions if you're seeing it anything other than what it is. All right, so let's try another one. This is fun. Of course, we could go on all day with this stuff, but as always, please check us out, marketrebellion.com/get started to get some good information on getting you started with your options trading. Let's try a different one here, guys. Same kind of topic here. You want to buy shares. Why? You think they're going higher. And that's fine if you're a stock trader. But now let's say that our stock is 100, but you're terrified. Maybe you're coming into earnings, maybe this or maybe that. But for some reason, you don't want to take losses below 100. Why? I have no idea. But the trader said, I don't want any losses below 100. So we go to a pricing model. It says a 90-day $100 call is trading for $4.58. All right, question now, Scotty, how much is the option?
Well, that's an at-the-money call. Strikes the 100 strike, stock's at 100.
Yep.
So there's no intrinsic value. So
there's no intrinsic value.
Option is the risk premium.
Now, even though the CBOE and the OCC would, in both cases, they would say this is a 458 option and the other one was 21. We don't want you to see it that way. We want you to see the other one as a dollar option. That's what you paid for the right to walk away. This option is $4.58. So here's another question. Which of those, Scott, or let's do Stu, is more expensive, the $21 option or the $4.58 option?
Well, I'm going with the $4.58 option.
$4.58 is far more expensive, and very few people will ever tell you that. They'll say, oh, gosh, I would never spend $21 on the option. It's not. It's $1. It's basically stock with a cheap insurance policy.
You got to go back to the delta, right? You got to think about what it is. What Bill was talking about with the helicopter and the car and all that stuff, right? It's basically stock. If you got an option that's $21 on an 80 strike,
that's stock.
With whatever to go, it's stock, man. It's going to have like a 90, 92 delta,
right?
That's stock. That's what it is. So that's just stock. Call it what it is. That's it.
But however, there is a different kind of risk. And that's really kind of our topic here. There are different types of risks, just like our helicopter.
This is back to
But now what you're accepting is more about gamma risk.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really delta risk. That's what you're trying to avoid. You don't want to take losses below the current stock price, but you're accepting gamma risk. So what is this? Well, remember that gamma is one of our Greeks. It's a characteristic of options, and it tells the acceleration of deltas. So if you have an at-the-money option and the stock goes in the money, or the option goes in the money, then it's going to start generating or manufacturing deltas. You're going to go from a 50 delta, 55, 60, and eventually up to 1, either super deep in the money or at expiration, if it's in the money. Or you're going to decelerate them in the other direction. They're going to go from 50 to 40, 30, and quickly down to 0. And that's the key, that this call can go out of the money quickly. And if enough time passes, which might not really be all that much at all, it might not ever have time to recover. Whereas the $21 or the $80 call for 21 would. So for example, here's our $100 call that we saw. There's the bend or the risk graph. There's the bend at 100. And if we look at what's called the current curve, it would look like this. This has 90 days to expiration. So notice it looks a little bit like a smile. And that is from positive gamma. So Scott, if you could kind of explain what's happening here as we go from, let's say way out here to the far left where that blue line's fairly flat to up here where that blue line is matching the black line.
Well, one way to view gamma, using the car analogy, Bill, that is gamma's the acceleration of your deltas.
Yep.
So that curve is often called the gamma curve.
Yep.
Or the speed at which you arrive at a higher delta or a higher option price, or
that's exactly it.
Profit or loss.
You can
and that's
see
a profit
that it's
and loss graph, so it's showing an acceleration towards gains or losses.
And that's exactly true too. You can look at it in terms of the acceleration of your gains or losses. And so that's another type of risk. If you have the ability to accelerate losses, sounds like a risk to me. Now, 60 days later, let's say with 30 days to expiration, we might move from the blue to the red. So now look what happens. Do you see how the curvature to the left is a little flatter compared to, you see how the blue sits above the red? We talked about that with that T delta. As time goes by, what happens to our deltas? We might be a delta, I don't know, what does that look like? 30 down here maybe. And down here we might be delta about 5. But what about over here? At 105, we might be delta 85. And down here, we might be delta 99. So notice how once the option is in the money, passage of time increases the deltas. If it's out of the money, it's just the opposite. They will lower them. That's T delta. And so that's a good way to kind of visualize it.
As time draws close to expiration, your option will become more aggressive.
Exactly. Yep. All options are going to move either towards 0 or 1 at expiration. So we can see that this current curve is going to move toward the black. Now, we just talked about an $80 call. Let's say with 30, it was trading for 21 initially. And with 30 days to expiration, the corresponding, what would be the red curve here on our $100 call, the current curve would look like this. So notice that if the stock falls down here to 95 and you bought that $100 call, you're dead in the water. You're just, chances that that's going to recover is virtually 0. But look at the green line. The slope down here is still about the same as it is up here in the black, which is stock. You've still got very high deltas. You can easily recover. So you don't have the gamma risk. Why? Because you're super deep in the money. It's behaving like stock. Stock doesn't have gamma. All right. So those are again some things that you have to think about when you are setting up your trades. If you don't know all of the different factors, or at least some of the key ones that are going to be affecting you on this trade, and you're just thinking it's the stock going up or down, especially if you're trying to play earnings like with NVIDIA, good luck. It's just not going to work. Just not going to work. All right, let's try another one. Short-term at-the-money options, we said have gamma risk, but what about theta risk? We hear this a lot from people. They constantly just bang on about theta risk, huge risk, get me out, I've got theta risk, or let me sell options because I get positive theta. Well, remember about theta. Is it really a risk? Nah. theta isn't a risk. Now, I know it's going to come as a shock to many of you, but why do we not consider it a risk from a professional trading standpoint?
I know what it is, man.
Risk is about, what's our key word here?
The unknown.
The unknown or uncertainty. So why is this not an unknown then, Stu?
Because I know what it is, man. What do you mean?
Right. You know that your 458 option is going to zero. You know that your $21 call is losing $1. You know that's happening in 90 days. It's one of the few things that you can predict with 100% accuracy in the options market. So how is that possibly uncertainty? We know where it's going. It's not a risk. It's a characteristic of an option. And that doesn't mean it's something that we want to ignore, but you really shouldn't see it as a risk. Otherwise,
and there's also different curves.
For sure.
Data. We're not going to get into that here, but you know, listen, that's just another thing for the people to think about, right? There's out of the money curves, there's at the money curves. There's different kind of curves that we have to think about that could affect strategy and how we maintain and adjust the strategy as we move forward.
And speaking of, let's do one real quick. So out of the money options, they decay faster in the first half of their life. Comes as a shock to a lot of people. Now, when I say out of the money, I'm talking about 10% or more out of the money, not a few pennies. Yeah. But the further out of the money, the more the effect, the more it decays in the first half. And it's exactly the opposite of at the money. So if you want to know something that's going to throw a wrench into your decisions is when something behaves exactly opposite of the way that you thought it did. Hey, I put my car in forward. No, it's in reverse.
Yeah, and you went backwards to hit the guy behind you. Oops.
That's what happens if you don't understand these effects. So let's go back to, let's say 100 days to expiration, 20% vol, 1% interest. The 115 call is trading for 50 cents. Now, this is one where a lot of people might say, I want to sell the option because I don't want any delta risk. I don't think this is going to go in the money. And so what they do, though, is they try to ride it all the way to expiration. But take a look at that curve. This is the way that here's 100 days to expiration. Here's zero. Notice that it's kind of pushed in from the top down, kind of concave this way. And if we looked at what we might call the traditional time decay curve for an at the money, it looks like this. It's just the opposite.
Or another way to say it is, how much of that 50 cents do you think you're actually going to make in the last 20 or 30 days?
Yeah, look at how flat it is. Right, nothing. It's already bled out.
Nothing.
For the reasons we talked about. It has no chance of recovery at this point in time. That's why the pricing model is saying at this point, might as well call it done.
Well, we just to clarify, it's never no chance, but
no, you know, I'm just saying, but
mathematically, it's the model is saying it doesn't.
But right, but it's saying according to drift, it's got no chance of that happening. That's why it's pricing it down here at next to nothing. Yeah. But let's look at the halfway point of the options life. Remember, hypothetically, it's got 100 days to expiration, but you can make it anything. Make this 30 days and this 15. It's the halfway point. So this option has decayed 30%, the at the money. This one's decayed 80%. And yet traders will say, let me continue riding it all the way into expiration, when what they should do is close it and rewrite another 100-day for another 50 days. In total, they've still held it for 100 days, but they've collected far more money. And it's all because of these misperceptions in which parts are moving, where are the risks, what are the rewards, what's the risk-reward connection. We find that so many of the problems that traders run into are from these topics. So again, this was just kind of a quick survey of a handful of them. We could show you 20 or 30 different examples, vastly different, but the same idea.
Yeah, they're all different. You got Vega risk, you got row risk.
Oh, we could do tons on Vega. Yeah.
You got to think about these things. You know, if you got like, for example, real quick, if you have, say, the VIX trading at 35, maybe you want to think twice about buying a year and a half out option.
Exactly.
That's a 65 delta.
Yep. Or calendar spreads or whatever. Yep.
Be a great idea.
Yep.
It doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It just means you have to consider the Vega component, and then be okay with it. Right. That's all it means. Right. It just means that you have to look at it. By not looking at it, you're being You're not being a very good risk manager.
Ostrich strategy, right? So let's go back to our Chalk Talk question. We'll wrap it up here. So somebody gives you the offer to bet $1 to make 3 or to bet 3 to make 1. Which is riskier? Well, again, all things equal, betting 1 to make 3 is riskier. Why? Because the market realizes it's a lower probability bet, so they push the price down. And that's what in turn pushes the reward up. So if you look at this,
risk is, people, it's really about the probability
of making money or of losing money. So if you look at this as maybe a 4-point vertical spread, a lot of traders are attracted to this because they go, oh, it's lower risk and I got a bigger reward. I'm minimizing risk, I'm maximizing reward. It's just the opposite. Here, it's a higher probability. The market has pushed the price up to 3 and left you with a $1 reward because there's a higher probability of getting. In this case, both options are in the money, or for the credit spread would be out of the money. So anyway, I know it's a lot to take in, but we just wanted to show this to you because I know you guys hear it all the time when you're coaching, that people always talk about risk and reward and they immediately go down a wrong path. So if you found out that a lot of this stuff was a little fuzzy or maybe brand new, that's okay. This wasn't meant to be a training class. It's meant to show you that there's a lot more moving parts that you probably haven't considered. And if you're not taking those into account, it's not going to work out in the long run. So we really got to wrap it up. But any quick closing comments, Stu or Scotty?
Well, I can share a story from a student today that just emailed me, who was originally just buying single calls, and he chose to play NVIDIA, and I'm not advocating that, but he emailed, said he bought an at the money vertical spread. Implied volatility was extremely high. And he said what his past experience, knowing what he knows now, knowing what he's learned through trading verticals and understanding volatility and being able to offset that, he had a very healthy profit and did it in a way that was very sophisticated and fitting to the volatility conditions.
Yep, beautiful. And those are the things that you have to consider to make this stuff work. Stu, any final 10-second comments?
Real quick, I had a situation yesterday similar to Scott, right? We were looking at NVIDIA and it was a $30 iron butterfly.
Butterfly, I think, yeah.
30 point wing that was being priced at about $25. Well, look at the $25 number. You say, this is ridiculous. It's really risky. Why would I do that?
Right.
Well, the answer was because the probability.
Great example. Right.
The probability of the move, the implied move was like 70.
Yeah.
The move that you were betting on was 30.
That's a great, it's relatively speaking, it was a relatively safe deal. Right.
It was a relatively safe bet. The bet was that it would move more than 30 points. And of course, who would say that NVIDIA wouldn't move more than 30 points on the earnings?
And yet many traders would turn that down because they'd say it's a $25 option and that's too risky.
Yeah.
And they're just going to miss the opportunities. So anyway, we know it was a lot to take in, but we hope that you picked up some good little tidbits of advice. And with that, I think we have to call it quits here. But thanks for being here again, Scotty. Yeah. Hopefully we can have you on next week. And Stu, as always. And for everybody else, have a great upcoming weekend. And we'll look for you next Thursday on Coach's Corner. We'll see you then.
Take care.
Good afternoon, everyone.